Well, this week we are with Ryan Buckenmeyer of RBI Insurance. Ryan, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Can you tell us a little bit about your company?
Thanks for asking. RBI Insurance Agency, we're a local independent insurance agency. We're absolutely focused on helping our clients find the best value in their insurance. So delivering the best client experience. The reality is with insurance is we're protecting your largest assets and helping you recover from probably the worst days of your life. And so that needs to be correct. That needs to be done right. So we're dedicated to doing that.
So Ryan, you're here to talk to us a little bit about what to know or consider about homeowners insurance.
Absolutely. And really, insurance all is a little bit bigger picture than just homeowners, right? So for the sake of this, of course, for you guys, we specify homeowners. But in all of insurance, nearly every coverage will apply to either your property, your stuff, or liability, something that you're responsible for, whether it happens on your property or it's because of something you did, right? Something you said or typed, something along those lines. There are a few coverages that don't fit, but very simple outside of that. So there is a lot of complexity inside of this and what's covered and what's not covered and how it's covered, but everything will really boil down to one of those two categories.
So when looking for homeowners insurance, a buyer has to know I've got to cover my stuff, and then I also have to cover what I'm responsible for. What are stuff is fairly obvious, what's in the house. What are some things that they have to be aware of in a liability aspect when owning a home?
The exposures on the property, right? So exposures being the fancy word for risk that could happen at your house, right? Whether it's a slight difference in the level of concrete and somebody could trip on that. Handrails on a couple steps. A pool is a big risk. Trampolines. Sometimes we see doors out to like a flat roof, a patio or a porch area that's 10 feet up in the air with no railing. Naturally, that's a big risk, right? So it's things along those lines where you would be, in our world, we talk about at fault, negligent, or liable for some accident or injury that could be involved. Could be an animal, a dog, a cat, a tiger, poisonous snake. You name it, like it's all out there, right?
So what is at risk, what is negligent, and then what is at fault? Did I say those right?
Yeah, different order, but yeah, they're all in there. So negligence is exactly what it sounds like, right? I failed to maintain my property in some way. At fault would be where simply that you're held responsible for what happens. Liability is a fancy word for those two things, really.
Okay. So what might I be at fault at?
You run a stop sign and hit somebody, right?
Right.
That's auto, not house.
Sure, but like,
necessarily.
you know, like what do we want to think about being covered for? We talked about pools, talked about sidewalks. So someone slipping, someone tripping, someone hopefully not drowning in a pool. But what are things homeowners should be thinking about? I want coverage for this.
So when we talk about liability, it's somewhat tailored to the property because there are increases in risks, right? I have no railing on my upstairs patio. That's an increase in risk. But where your liability is really tied back to is your income, either your income or your assets. And so we use a calculation around that. And that you could be in a condo, you could be in an apartment, you can own a house. And either way, your liability is really tied to your assets.
Okay.
The amount of risk you have can be tied to the type of property and even sometimes the type of personality, but how much risk you have in a liability environment is more closely tied to your value. I hesitate to say human value, but in the court of law there are assignments on that kind of stuff.
So with assets, if someone were to be meeting with you and they're going to be buying a home, is there anything that they should take into consideration or think about as far as possessions that they have that maybe they wouldn't have thought about?
Yeah, sure. So for most people, their largest asset is their future income, right? Your largest hard asset would be your vehicles or your house, probably, or multiple homes, something along those lines. Sometimes a collection for some people, guns or jewelry or artwork, something along those lines. But for most people, it's I'm going to earn this amount this year for the rest of my life. That's my largest asset, really, until I'm very close to retirement. So around liability, that's the largest part of our conversation. And your future assets are not dependent on owning a small condominium or a monstrous house. your liabilities are tied to you as a person.
So when they talk to you, you're gonna talk about their background,
Absolutely.
their assets,
Yep.
and a little bit about their future maybe.
For sure.
So, and you're gonna talk about the property,
Mhm.
so you know what liability to cover per that particular property.
Yep.
And then you'll also talk about the property within that home. Tell us a little bit more about those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. So in everything we talk about, we break it down to a value, right? We talk about things in terms of the value of insurance for each individual. And that's 3 different components. One is price, right? How much you're gonna pay for that. Easy to find out. How much comes out of my checkbook, right? The second part is how much coverage do I get, right? Do I have $100,000 for all my stuff? Or do I have $200,000 for all my stuff? And that can vary from policy to policy, of course. And then the third piece is what is actually covered, right? The fancy word in our industry is perils. What are the things that are covered? What are the events where I get coverage out of it? That will vary a lot, and it's very difficult to see on a proposal or on a quote. It's usually in the 45 pages of fine print. So those 3 things together, you can have the best price and the most coverage, and if it doesn't cover, say, weight of ice and snow in Northwest Ohio, I would argue that's not a great value. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you wanna weigh the cost of the policy
Absolutely.
with what is actually covered.
Absolutely.
Because if you're only paying $10 a month, but you don't have what you like ice and snow coverage on your roof and your roof collapse, then you're not going to be made whole again
Correct.
with that insurance
Correct.
policy.
Yeah, and that's the point, right? You want your house back. Typically, most people want their house back the way it was before the storm came through. Something along those lines. Absolutely.
Are there standards of coverage in most homeowners insurance policies?
There are
Okay.
some regulatory standards that are mandated through the Ohio Department of Insurance. Probably a little bit too much for our conversation
Okay.
today. When if we really get into a lot of the nuts and bolts, I wouldn't watch them for that long.
Good to know. You're like, nope, I'm fine with it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in summary, yes, and at a very high level, basic form, broad form, special form, sometimes referred to as a comprehensive form, or all perils. None of them do justice to the subtlety and nuance that are truly inside of these documents. And that's where the time, so we talk about this in a funny way in our office, right? We talk about future Amanda should know that past Amanda made a good insurance decision, right? You're laughing about this, but this is
Sure.
really it. Because you're not gonna think about insurance every day. If you do, then we both failed, right, in our time together. What you should do is have enough information to make an educated decision, a value-based decision, and then future Amanda knows past Amanda or past Carly made a great insurance decision that fit their lifestyle, and then the times we need to revisit that are those life changes, cars, income changes, I don't know, husbands, right? Like things like that, where you've got defined changes in your life, or something changes on the insurance side, and that's our role to be in touch with our clients on those. Is that
Somewhat.
reasonable?
I guess if I hadn't owned a home and someone's like, okay, go get homeowners insurance, I'm like, cool, what's it gonna cover? We've talked a little bit about the liability part, but is it standard that if my pipes freeze and they burst and I have a flood, am I gonna be covered? Is that going too far?
No, that's fine. Coverage questions are difficult to answer because there's a lot of subtlety and nuance to. So even take your question, pipe broke, right? Pipe burst, the frozen burst. We just had this a couple weeks ago. Did you turn your heat off or not?
Okay.
Right? If you turned your heat off, no, it's not covered. If you didn't turn your heat off, generally, and you didn't do it on purpose, yeah, we very likely.
Nope.
I know, you laugh.
If you set your house on fire, it's not going to be covered. So intentional.
There you go, right?
Intention.
If I leave a
Intent.
candle here and I go to the store and that burns my house down and I didn't do it on purpose, we're covering that loss. We're covering that damage. If I did it on purpose.
If I took a match and threw it on a bed of straw on the couch, that's
Not ideal, right? Not ideal. Yeah, probably not a covered loss.
probably not covered.
Yeah.
No.
So I would be very resistant to say absolutely that's covered every time. I'm also going to be pretty resistant to saying absolutely that's never covered.
Sure.
Sometimes, but not a lot. There is a lot of subtlety and there is a lot of nuance to the policy language. So what I would say is, in shopping for homeowners insurance and even broader insurance, is it's worthwhile to be prepared to spend some time on it. That's one of the big challenges for folks is, unfortunately, our industry teaches people that they can shop for insurance in 15 minutes or less, or in that range. You can, but you can't hit all three components. You can't hit price, coverage, and type of coverage in 15 minutes. It's just not feasible. It's not reasonable. Maybe an attorney speed reader, maybe.
So then, would you recommend if someone is home shopping, got under contract for a house, they start the insurance process right away?
Sooner than later, yeah. Typically right around inspection time is
Okay.
a good time. You're by and large, what, 2-3 weeks out at the short
1
end?
to 2 weeks.
1 to 2. That'd be, yeah, pretty quick, 1 week after inspection, maybe as long as 4 or 5 weeks, depending on how the house progresses. But yeah. Some of it's timeline too. We can move really quick with folks, right? And some people, their schedules are more demanding and we have to schedule time out a week or so to review.
What are some things you want homeowners to be prepared to talk to you about when determining what type of coverage
So
or
there's,
insurance they should get?
there's very little things that they need to prepare for beyond just aggregating data. So you do have to give some of your personal information, your date of birth and social security number, things along those lines. Outside of that, we're not asking any questions that are real complex. It's more along the lines of, do you have any really valuable guns? And you kind of know that right off the top of your head, right? Occasionally people need to go back and do an appraisal on a piece of artwork or something along those lines, but there's not a lot of stuff coming out of left field.
So besides birthday, social security, are there documents that they need to bring to you, like W-2s or any of that stuff to prove?
Typically not. Appraisals for higher value items. We love to look at prior insurance, any experience they have, because we want to understand what our clients already know. If they already have a really good understanding of insurance, then there may be pieces that we don't have to dig in quite as deep on. So yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't hurt to bring those along, certainly. Worst case is we don't look at them. Yeah.
So what types of questions are you going to ask them to help determine the type of coverage and the amount of coverage that they need?
Really for us, we are hitting a handful of checkpoints throughout the policy, and these are less questions and more conversation items around the type of property you have and how much property you have. There are any questions that we have are typically directly tied to a specific coverage. So for example, underground service line coverage, right? You normally have water and gas or some version of those two, and sometimes electric that run between your foundation and the service main. Most policies we can buy coverage back for those. Not everybody wants it. That would be a conversation we would have around one line item amongst a bunch of other line items in a homeowner's policy.
So you're asking them, do you ask them questions, how do you live, or tell us about some features of the house?
Oh, absolutely. And we love looking at the inspections with folks too. I mean, buying a home is such a fun and personal experience for people. They buy a house, they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a house because they love the house. They can see themselves and their family in it. What we do is make sure that those people stay in that house. So.
And keep their things.
Absolutely, yeah. You're not there without the comfy chair.
Right, yeah, no,
You're
definitely
comfy
not.
chair.
Definitely not.
Yeah, absolutely. So sure, hobbies matter, absolutely. What you take with you on a daily basis and what you do matters. There are times where your profession overlaps, like ours, profession overlaps your personal life quite a bit. And that can affect your liability piece, your insurance on that side, and sometimes property too. Yeah, in purchasing insurance, it can be overwhelming, right? And that's not a feeling just the homeowner has. So what I've found in my time in this industry is that a lot of agents have the same feeling, so they sell the process short. Not to be critical of any individual person, but there's a lot of subtlety and nuance to it. I know we've used those words a handful of times, but it's because it's really there. This isn't something we have to do every year. We don't need to put this time in every year. But you're gonna spend a small percentage of your annual income. Okay, I'm a numbers nerd, okay? You guys, like, I'm a math nerd at heart. So you're gonna spend a percentage of your annual income every year to protect your most important things. Your house, your cars, your future income, your disability, whatever those are in the world of insurance. Let's make sure those are right for you. Carly, your decisions are gonna be different than Amanda, your decisions, and those are gonna be different than my decisions. I have my preferences. There's very few places in our process we recommend anything. My recommendation is you have a reasonable understanding of insurance. That's where I come in. Because I have a stupid understanding of insurance, and I want to translate that to people that don't need to have that depth of understanding of insurance on a daily basis. You have an understanding of the property market like nobody else does, right? Or the general public does not. So we lean on you to help us make a good decision. Same thing here. If you're not getting that process from whatever source you're going to for insurance, or let me better state that, be sure that whatever source you're using for insurance is giving you that guidance and that direction and that time to really help you understand what it is. I'm the first to admit it's not the most fun for the general public. It is for me. Again, I'm a math and numbers nerd. Actuarial science is a blast. But put the time in, right?
So you want homeowners to know, more so for our new ones than our repeat ones, but homeowners should know this is a very specific individual
Absolutely.
process,
It really
because
is.
even if we're buying identical houses, we live differently and have different things as well
Absolutely.
as just differences to account for.
Absolutely. And I talk to 20-year-olds and 70-year-olds all the time that have never done this, right? I would say for better or worse, but it's for worse. They haven't done these things. So when we have our time with our clients, we hear quite often, like, oh boy, I've never heard these things before. And it's really a shame, because it should be the standard and the norm, but it's difficult. It's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world, which is also why we don't do it every year. So we do it when it's demand, when it's in demand, and buying a house is a good reason to take some time and understand it. So, I mean, why do you go look at a house 2 or 3 times, hopefully, right, in a good market?
When we're able.
In a reasonable
When we're
market,
able,
right?
yes.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, we've been in our house for 20 years, and when I lay in my bed at night, one window, there's a street light down the road that shines right in my eye. I didn't know that. I probably would have bought the house anyway, but how would I have known that?
Funny story, our first house, the street light came in, and I was like, I don't ever want to buy another house where the street light is right outside our house. And what did we do? We bought a
Street light right
house,
outside the house.
and it's even worse now, it's right in the bedroom rather than in the living room, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I missed it.
Yeah.
But
I missed it.
I think that sometimes even just driving down streets, and like you are pulling down a street and you can tell your headlights are shining directly into their living room, and you're like,
Yes.
oh, that would be so annoying. And I only drive down it like once in a while, but like
Yeah.
constant. Yeah.
So in the world of insurance, our time is devoted to helping our clients not be in that position after a claim, right? In the grand
You
scheme,
don't want to go to, well, we better get that now because we didn't have it before.
absolutely. I mean, full disclosure, I want all my clients to buy everything because that puts me in the best position to say, yes, you're covered,
Sure.
which everyone wants to hear when their car's upside down or their house is on fire, right? But the reality is that's not going to happen for everybody. Not everyone needs every coverage because every home and every lifestyle is different. But we want to put our clients in the best position to have an understanding of what the outcomes are. In some houses, there are cost prohibitive coverage, or just it's not available. You can't get it due to the circumstances of the house. Those are things that we want to discuss and run through with clients.
Makes me think of like solar panels.
Sure.
That's not a huge asset in our area, or very common, where it might be, say, in Florida.
Right.
So, do we want solar? Well, I don't have solar panels, so why
Yeah.
would I get it? But if I did get solar panels, you know, what kind of coverage or insurance would I need for that?
They'd be part of the structure. But yeah, that's a great thing you would want to talk to an agent about and make sure you have an understanding of cost and coverage for those. Yeah, absolutely.
Which is, like we said, it depends. It's dependent on the person,
It
it's dependent
depends,
on the location, it's
absolutely.
dependent on the house.
Take the last 2 years in the real estate market and look at replacement cost coverage on homes, right? You could build a house for probably 145, 150 a square foot 2 years ago, maybe even a little bit less for builder's grade. Now, good luck getting a builder out for under 210,
Right.
right? The real replacement cost has changed on homes drastically in 2 years. Insurance doesn't move that fast, right? Well, there are ways we can protect against that. Guaranteed replacement cost and extended replacement cost. Hopefully, those are conversations you have with your agent when you set up your policy.
Well, I think it's great information, Ryan, for our buyers to get an idea
Sure.
of what they should think about, because a lot of times it's the, hey, I need homeowners insurance, how much is it gonna cost me?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the reality is, until something happens, that's the natural tendency. I understand, you know, we really do have an understanding. That's, you've put a lot of motion and time into picking a house, and then you've got emotion and time tied to your interest rate on your loan if you have a loan, and you've got, you know, interest and time on insurance and title and just getting in the house and moving and you guys know all this stuff better than I do, right? There's a lot that goes into it. Insurance is one of the few pieces that will last forever, right? You bought the house, that's fine, you move on. Insurance sticks around and helps your house stick around and your lifestyle stick around.